Hello and welcome back to the podcast presented to you by the man who couldn't find work in his home country, living that welfare life, flew across the ocean looking for a fortune. Even a job would have been nice, looking for opportunity, you know. You don't come to America looking for opportunity. For me, the opportunity was just going skiing if I wanted, finding a mountain and taking a quad bike out, going to the south for some sun maybe. Um, yeah, just opportunities like that, you know. Maybe join a band and presented to you by the man who just today joined welfare in his new country. Things come full circle, and welcome to episode 3 of the Corona Sessions. So, can't really remember where we left off, but I do know what I did on day 3, so we can just kick into that. Essentially, though, before we start, I just want to say I want to add 2 new sections to this podcast. They won't take up much time, and I'm not trying to expand this into something like past what it is meant to be. But essentially, it is a music podcast, and I listen to music a lot, so I'm going to recommend an album every episode. So the album I'm going to recommend today is from a band which would be rude of me not to mention and recommend, because it is the band that I mentioned in episode 1. It is the band who got my creative juices flowing again to actually start writing music again. It's been a couple of months since I had wrote music. I was always playing guitar away, but I never really tried to write anything for months. And then just that night, that fateful night, the juices started flowing, and I'm going to recommend that you guys and gals listen to The Scratch. The reason I'm doing this at the beginning of the podcast as well is that if you are listening to it on Spotify, you can just search on Spotify while I'm talking, and then if you did want to give them a listen, you can just press play afterwards. So the band is The Scratch, THE space SCRATCH, The Scratch. Like if you have an itch, they are The Scratch. And the album I'm going to recommend is called Couldn't Give a Rat's, especially a song I really enjoy called God Slap. And outside that album, I would recommend the song The Punisher. 2 class songs there, and a really good album, honestly, thoroughly enjoyable. I've listened to it a whole bunch. But speaking of albums, let's go back to the one I'm trying to write. And last time I told you that I explained how I basically write ideas down on my phone, and essentially that's what I did for a couple of days. So also I just want to mention this podcast that if I say day 1, day 2 and day 3, it is not chronological. Like if Monday is day number 1, Tuesday might not be day number 2, it might be Thursday, day number 3 could have been Saturday. It's just the next day that I do something to advance this project. And day 3, I said, you know what, I probably have enough lyrics spoken into my phone. Now it's time to do grunt work, the manual labor of just listening back over to the recordings, writing them out. And that's what I did. And it's interesting when you go back over and do this, because and I was just thinking as I was doing it, I was like, wow, if you didn't set a cut-off point, right, and you just wanted to speak into your phone and you had a topic that you wanted to talk about, you could honestly have about 90 verses. Legit, when do you stop? When do you just say, right, enough is enough? You have a new idea for this thing. You have a new idea for this topic. Oh, you have another new lyric here. You new guitar riff that might fit that chord pattern. You have a new solo section. You have all this stuff. You really do have to just say, enough is enough. I won't have to do this. And a quick example I could give you is, when I was younger, I didn't really like history at all in school. It was a subject I found boring, kind of pointless. I'm talking about 13, 14 type thing. But now I really like history. I enjoy, I just enjoy it. I think it's such an interesting and uniquely human thing to be able to look back in the past, and understand what happened before us. Rabbits don't, swans don't, do you know what I mean? They have these animal instincts that allow them to make migrations and stuff, which is obviously based on patterns that's like inbred into them, um, just through genetics or whatever. But like we can actually understand and like with photographs, look at a photograph from like the 1940s and be like, wow, like I understand that this was in the past. And that's pretty cool, I think. But if I was to write a song on that, say when I was 13, the song would have been like how boring history is, like how pointless it is, um, whatever. And then now I love it. Do you know what I mean? It would be like a more romantic song almost. And if I if this was a real situation and I started writing the song when I was 13 and didn't stop, just said like I'm just going to keep spouting lyrics until like the song just magically becomes complete without me actually sitting down and working on it being specifically a song and not just an idea, the song would be so schizophrenic. Do you know what I mean? And also brings light to another point, which would be like songs are a point in time. You know, I could write a song about history back in when I was 13, 14, and then write a second song now. Do you know what I mean? Doesn't mean you can't write two songs based on the same subject as your life changes, which is another reason why you should give yourself a cut-off point. And then if you aren't finished with that idea and you're like, oh man, I wish this song had A, B, or C, then write another song based on the same thing, you know? I mean, Iron Maiden have a bunch based on war, right? Why not? They're all class. So that was just kind of a thought that came to me as I was doing this, and I was like kind of glad that I decided to do it this way and give myself that cut-off point. So, yeah, after writing out the lyrics, I realized, wow, I actually did have enough. 8 pages is what I wrote, in fact. So I'm just going to read some random lyrics out to you now. Here's the story, and you're going out drinking. Sorry, here's the story, and you're going out drinking with your friends tonight. Well, doesn't that just sound right? Then I noticed I actually had like 3 different choruses. The subject of the chorus was kind of the same, but the melody was different in all of them, and the lyrics were different in all of them. So I'm just going to read out 2 to you here. And it's a story that's happening every night in a country that I love, and you don't get to crack like it anywhere else on earth. That was one. And now again, these are just scratch lyrics. That's what I call them, scratch lyrics. They're not even demos yet. They're just random thoughts that came to my head while thinking about the subject, and I just shoot them out and then write them down. All of these might make it into the song or none of them, but they do give me a basis to work on, a foundation. Another chorus idea I had was, this all happens in a town I know, and it's a town that I love. I'll complain left and right that it's a terrible place, just full of the scum of the earth. And yeah, that was one. And then it goes on to say, like, but sure, isn't it a town like yours and a story you know, and I think you might even live it tonight. Yeah, and it turns out, like, as I was reading over it, I was like, wow, I actually have a lot of the story written out, like, kind of in song form, like in verses of, like, you know, I told the story of what it was. It's basically 2 guys going out drinking. They don't like interact, and it's not judging one way of drinking over the other. But essentially, they start drinking, they go out drinking, they get home, they wake up hungover. That's basically the story. But I actually had like some lyrics based on each section of the song, which I was like, I don't even remember doing. I was like pretty happy when I was writing them down and listening back over. So this is a. So at the beginning of the song, the guy, he walks to the pub and he goes out drinking. And he walks from his house to the pub. That's like the main kind of point. But then at the end of the night, he's after getting a battered burger, chips, whatever, and now he's going home. So now this is him getting home at the end of the night. It's get a taxi 5 minutes down the road. Didn't need a lift in, but for some reason can't seem to walk home. Thank the taxi driver for charging me 20 and also Pogue Mahone. Just a bit of the end of the night, and then the next morning I have lyrics for that as well, like stomach finally settling and I have my coffee, I'm reading the daily news, still bad politicians, still bad weather, sure what else is new. Just some like kind of things. So then I realized, you know, I have all these lyrics and stuff, and that was like grunt work writing that down. So I wanted to kind of get creative, and I said, like, I can't just keep writing verses and keep writing choruses. I need to have like a structure for the song. So then I worked on a structure, and I worked on 2 different structures. So one is if the verses are super long then I can just have like a verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus kind of structure. But then I was thinking like that's a possibility because like I'm talking about two different stories happening at once. So essentially it's like the length of two verses for every one verse. So it's quite possible that I could do that and create lots of lyrics. But then I was thinking like if it's sung quickly or there's only 3 lines per person per verse, then the verses could be like quite short. So I don't want too many choruses because it would just become so crowded. That would be dreadful. So I thought of these two different structures. So the first one is the riff I played, which you were, the pints. We're going for lovely pints bit, and then from there it goes into verse 1, then back into that lovely pints, which then bursts into the first chorus. So it goes opening, then verse 1, then the opening riff again, then chorus 1, then verse 2, chorus 2, verse 3, chorus 3, verse 4, chorus 4. See the way it's like just very standard, like verse, chorus, verse, chorus. That's because the verses are going to be really long here. And then after chorus 4, we'll have a musical break before verse 5, and then finish it again with that opening riff. But if the verses are short, I said I'd keep the same kind of opening to it, but change things down the line. So I went like the opening riff with the pints, then verse 1, then the riff again, which bursts into the first chorus, then verse 2, chorus 2, verse 3, musical break, verse 4, chorus 3, and then end with verse 5, and then wrapping it back around to the opening riff again. And that's kind of what I did on day 3. Just yeah, that's it essentially. Just wrote some lyrics, did some grunt work. Kind of became thankful of this project because of what I said earlier about like you can spend way too long on a topic and then just go on forever, like 90 verses even. Honestly, you could. And another thing I realized is that like as I was listening, I was like, there's different melodies for each idea I had. I like sang and I was doing like a different rhythm for a verse, and then I was like, oh, here's another idea for a verse, and it was like a different rhythm and singing pattern again for a different verse. So I actually have like a bunch of different melodies also out. So I'll probably scrap all of the melodies or like do a mix of a bunch of them. But that's also an interesting thing about recording it instead of just writing it down. Yeah, just gonna grab a little sip of coffee here. Yeah, so day 3, wrote the lyrics out, done a bit of grunt work on that, and then wrote some structure for the song. And yeah, like I said, day 4 won't be like the very next day. It'll be next time I do something creative. I already have day 4 done, so that podcast will probably come out pretty soon, maybe in the next three days or so. And yeah, it's because essentially I just want to get up to date, so each podcast is more modern essentially. And I'm just going to end this by talking about the second segment. So I said segment 1 will be mentioning an album, and the album this week was Couldn't Give a Rat's by The Scratch. I would recommend that. Give it a listen through. The second segment is just a little glimpse into my life, which isn't that important, but like if I watch a movie, I'm just going to like say a bit about the movie. If I'm playing a new computer game, I'll mention that, like whatever, just like something personal that I did that day. Might not be every day. It might be like once a week type thing. And the reason I'm doing that is just to kind of give you a glimpse into me as a person as well as me as a musician. So then you get to kind of see the artist and where the art comes from, not just the art itself. Just so you kind of get an understanding of the person behind it. I think it'll be interesting. And again, it'll just be like a 30-second film review, and then you know what kind of movies I watch, etc. Anyway, rambling now, so I'll end it there, and thanks for listening, and I will see you next time for episode 4 of the Corona Sessions.